on this edition of the program. You want to understand what's happening now? Go back to 1992 and cacophonous, chaotic, competent. How would you describe the first month of Trump 47? Kirk Bado joins the show. It's all coming up.
The following is brought to you by Just Another Pilot.
Hello and welcome everybody to the Politics program for February 12th, 2024. Your old pal Justin Robert Young joining you here in Austin, Texas. Very, very excited to have everybody back on the program. Very excited to have Kirk Bado of Hotline from National Journal on the show. That's a great conversation. And it also covers something that I am fascinated by, and that is what the hell is going on with Nancy Mace of South Carolina. She has been on one as of late in terms of attention gathering, but on Monday night did something I've never seen before, in which she personally named 4 people in South Carolina, including her ex-fiance, and called them rapists, peeping toms, and worse, including leveling claims that she was raped, and then went after somebody that may or may not be a political opponent of hers in the next year and a half. We'll talk about that with Kirk. But I want to begin with this. Donald Trump's second term does not look like his first term. In his Super Bowl interview with Brett Baier, Trump said that back in 2017, he was a New York guy, a novice to Washington, D.C., and all but admitted that he stepped on every rake that he could see. He appointed the wrong people, he got caught up in the wrong traps, and he was not able to effectively govern. I would say if it weren't for the fact that he got his tax cuts passed, even conservatives might look at what happened during the Trump administration as, at least from the governmental side, a net negative. Now, to the novice, you would say, well, what's changed? He was causing chaos then, he's causing chaos now. This show knows that there is a difference. Before, the chaos was happening to him. Now, he is the one orchestrating it. And by that, I mean that he is taking his agenda to the centers of government for which he believes he was sent back to D.C. to reform. Agencies long targeted by conservatives are now actually being affected, slashed, possibly shuttered. This is a direct assault on the federal government in the way that it has been known. And that is something that many people have promised. But to this point, only Trump has been serious about taking this quick, some would say reckless, of an action to do. So if we can't really compare what we've seen over the last month to anything that has happened in the past as a sitting president, what would we look to compare it to? I would submit to you this: the year of our Lord, 1992, and 3 people for whom I think you can at least cobble together the kind of actions that we have seen in this first month of the 47th presidency of the United States. Pat Buchanan, Ross Perot, and Bill Clinton. Let's start with Buchanan. Nobody brought to the presidential stage the conversation around immigration like Pat Buchanan did. And while he had a pretty short run in 1992, he was running against an incumbent in George H.W. Bush. And after some early noise, he failed out. He was really at his heart a pundit, a writer. somebody that was on television a lot. And that's really where his legacy lies. There is no Ann Coulter without a Pat Buchanan to talk about immigration and to keep those home fires lit for the time that Donald Trump winds up picking up that mantle back in 2016. One of Buchanan's biggest issues, that the Supreme Court had never truly ruled on whether or not birthright citizenship was legal. Specifically, that the 14th Amendment was being misinterpreted to say that anybody who gave birth in America, their child would be a citizen, as opposed to the under the jurisdiction thereof line, saying that you would need to be a legal citizen for whom you would have your offspring automatically become a citizen. And what Donald Trump is doing is something that Pat Buchanan suggested he would do in 92 and 96 when he ran. And that is challenge the 14th Amendment on birthright citizenship. But birthright citizenship is being caught up in the courts right now. That's something that's going to be adjudicated over the next year. Let's look at what many people consider to be the biggest story. And I would say, like I did last week, probably the most novel story that we have seen in American government. And that is Doge, a full-on buzzsaw to the amount of money, the size, and the scope of the federal government. And in my opinion, there is nobody who has talked about this more vociferously than H. Ross Perot, specifically in 1992. When Perot ran for office in 92, he talked extraordinarily eloquently and oftentimes hilariously about the national debt, one that was at $4 trillion when he ran for office. We've tacked on another 30 trillion since then. Perot famously described the debt as follows: "The debt is like a crazy aunt we keep down in the basement. All the neighbors know she's there, but nobody wants to talk to her." He saw government as bloated and inefficient. He wanted drastic cuts, and he said that if he were president, he would do so by eliminating waste, fraud, and abuse in the federal system. He was the prototypical let's run the government like a business politician. Sound familiar? Side note, another thing that Trump and Perot really have in common is a deep distrust of the three-letter agencies. Obviously, Trump very much believes that the FBI was in charge of Crossfire Hurricane, which derailed his first term by way of Russian allegations. He then was further mad at them for raiding his home in Mar-a-Lago. He feels that they capitulated to the Justice Department and tried to put him in jail. Ross Perot had an axe to grind with a different three-letter agency, the CIA. Even though he was running the most successful independent campaign for president in history, he ended his pursuit of the presidency in 1992 because he believed that his campaign was infiltrated by CIA assets. And he said that was because his opponent, the sitting president of the United States, was the former head of the CIA. One can only imagine, as if we ever saw a President Perot, he would probably have pushed as aggressively to investigate and reform the CIA as Donald Trump is doing with the Justice Department and the FBI. End of digression. Let's get back to government spending. Perot's not the first candidate to say that the government needed to be smaller. He's just probably the most colorful to do it. But why? Why do politicians on both sides of the aisle say that they want to make the government smaller? Well, because for the last 30 years, it is only during times of extreme crisis that America wants the government to be bigger. Since 1992, Gallup has almost always found that more Americans agree that the government is trying to do too many things rather than saying that it should do more. Typical results in stable times show about 50 to 60% believing government is doing too much. That sentiment hit 60% in 1995 and a record 61% in 2012. Perot framed his fight against government waste as an existential one, that we would be denying the next generation the American dream if something was not done about the national debt and the size of the federal government. I was 9 when he said that in 1992. I'm now 41, about to be 42, with a 5-month-old daughter myself. Now, I have been able to live the American dream, and I'm very, very happy that I have been. But it is interesting to see that the verbiage on that kind of argument has changed. Perot, representing the mainstream at the time, was saying that we needed to do something or else. Whereas now you often hear politicians saying that currently people are not experiencing the American dream. They are indeed being left behind. The problem with anybody doing anything like this is that it's hard to connect the noise and chaos to something positive in the lives of the American public. Sure, they generally believe that the government should be smaller, but what should be smaller, how it should be smaller, and whether or not it is going to affect them is where all the trouble starts. Trump's win condition with Doge is not going to be showing a bunch of numbers on Twitter. It's going to be convincing America that they are benefited from it now. We shuttered USAID. You pay less taxes now. The child tax credit is going up now. We are taking money from places to where it doesn't belong and putting them in places where we believe it does. And if you agree, that makes Donald Trump good at his job. But at best, that's a medium-term solution. You are hoping that there is legislative action on something, or you are hoping that the economy continues to churn forward and you can say, well, it's because we are spending less and therefore we are on a greater path to reducing the deficit, that the rest of the world feels solid in our economic machine, and that's why things continue to hum. That doesn't leave a lot to talk about in the right now. Which brings us to our third 1992 name, Bill Clinton. Because Buchanan and Perot, they lost. Sure, Donald Trump might be co-opting some of their ideas, but they obviously didn't have the juice to get through to the winner's circle. Only one man did that in 1992. And he didn't stop thinking about tomorrow. It was Bill Clinton. And I got to say, this initial monologue was only going to focus on Perot and Buchanan until our dear friend Michael Cohen wrote this for 24 Sight on Tuesday, comparing what Trump is doing right now to Bill Clinton. We read, while Clinton was building a bridge to the 21st century, he was paying outsized attention to technology and kids at levels disproportionately popular in messaging but not impact. The first of these was Clinton's support for V-chips, computer chips embedded into televisions to block out violence. The public support for it was 72% in a 1995 public opinion poll, which drove it into the State of the Union address in 1996. Quote Clinton, our first challenge is to cherish our children and strengthen American families. I call on Congress to pass the requirement for V-chips in television sets so that parents can screen out programs they believe are inappropriate for their children. That provision ended up in the Telecommunications Act of 1996. Ultimately, the issue has much ado about nothing, as parents never really widely used the technology. But that same year, Clinton staked out a new space in the perceived political center in a radio address providing a new manual for school districts on how to adopt school uniforms to break the cycle of violence in our schools. This is a reaction to student killings over expensive sneakers and other designer clothing. That, too, was a popular position. 70% of principals felt school uniforms reduced discipline problems. However, as of 5 years ago, only 19% of all schools require uniforms, with 57% of private schools doing it. Now, you can compare that, and Michael does, to some of the stuff that Trump has done recently, taking men out of women's sports, the way that they describe it. That's 70% plus popular with the American public, despite the fact that there are relatively few people that are actually affected by the executive order. The banning of paper straws in favor of plastic ones, That's only going to be in place in federal buildings. The grand likelihood is that most people in their daily life will have no interaction with that executive order, and yet it is more than 70% popular. So while you are waiting for these big changes to happen, the sugar that makes the medicine go down are a bunch of 70-30 wedge issues where not only do you get credit for being a populist, but you are also daring your political opponents to be dumb enough to fight you when you have the high ground, Obi-Wan style. Because after all, is there really much of a difference between Make America Great Again and I Feel Your Pain? We got the update. Kirk Bado's coming up after that. This is your update brought to you by TakePoliticsSeriously.com. Again, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. It's where you go if you want to support this show. Become a paying subscriber. That's $3 a week. Billed is $12 a month. Or if you want to just lock it in, man, just lock it in for a year, dude. Come on in. $99 for over 150 episodes of PX3. It's less than $1 an episode. And it only gets cheaper. Like when you think about it. Head on over there. Look, obviously this takes a lot, and I greatly appreciate everybody who supports us. We've seen a big uptick since the administration has started because the news, it keeps on coming, and we will do our best to continue to keep up with it. In fact, I think we're due for something that we're probably overdue for, and that is a survey. So I'm going to be emailing all of you, free people, free subscribers and paid subscribers alike. If you are just somebody who follows this on a podcast, then head on over to politics.com, sign up, just get your email in there, and you'll get the email with everybody else. I'm going to send you guys a form. This is just something that we have done periodically. Let me know what you like about the show, what you don't like about the show. It has made tremendous changes to the way that we have operated here because I always want to be responsive to you, the listener, and now the viewer. But that's everything that you get there. Oh, yeah, and if you're a paying subscriber, 2 bonus episodes. Bonus episode on Monday, bonus episode on Thursday, and we have not had a hard time finding news to fill it. Just saying. Let's get to some of the stories that we weren't able to touch on. Unfreezing spending, unfiring appointees, undeleting websites, ungutting research grants, and unforking Elon Musk's bureaucratic resignation programs. These are all things that federal courts have blocked with Trump's early attempts to reshape the federal government. In just 24 hours, 6 judges issued orders against the president's actions, adding that 9 previous orders that halted executive decisions deemed potentially illegal. The situation has angered Trump's allies, with Elon Musk calling it a judicial coup, and J.D. Vance, the vice president of the United States, questioning judicial authority. While the Justice Department claims compliance with orders they consider impermissible, one judge threatened contempt charges over the federal funding freeze. Trump criticized the rulings on social media, claiming that they are impeding progress. The legal battles have effectively paused major initiatives, including changes to birthright citizenship and federal workforce reforms. Though district court rulings are temporary, appeals are moving to higher courts, while lawsuits revealing details about internal operations, including Musk's DOGE and controversial personnel decisions at various agencies, are ongoing. What I tell y'all? I told you this during the episode on Friday, that Doge was probably running as fast as they possibly could because they knew that eventually they were going to get snagged. They were going to get snagged in the bramble of government or the law. Now, we're going to talk more about this with Kirk Bado, but I don't think that these are quite the stopgaps that people might believe them to be. These are obviously lower court rulings. They will be appealed. I would not be shocked to see many of them at the Supreme Court level. We know for a fact that the birthright citizenship thing is happening at the Supreme Court. That's the whole goal with that executive order, is to get a Supreme Court ruling on it. Some of this other stuff, look, they're going to appeal it until they can't. And they're going to hope that political opinion, they being the Trump administration, are going to hope that the political will is on their side. By the way, a lot of conversation on whether or not the Trump administration is going to comply with these judges' rulings. Literally, as we are recording this, Donald Trump answered whether or not he is going to comply with the rulings during one of his Oval Office gaggles.
If a judge does block one of your policies, part of your agenda, will you abide by that ruling? Will you comply?
Well, I always abide by the courts, and then I'll have to appeal it. But then what he's done is he slowed down the momentum, and it gives crooked people more time to cover up the books. If a person's crooked and they get caught, other people see that, and all of a sudden it becomes harder later on. So, yeah, the answer is I always abide by the courts, always abide by them, and will appeal. But appeals take a long time, and I would hope that a judge, if you go into a judge and you show him, here's a corrupt situation, we have a check to be sent, but we found it to be corrupt. Do you want us to send this corrupt check to a person, or do you want us not to give it and give it back to the taxpayer? I would hope a judge would say, don't send it, give it back to the taxpayer.
Let's do a little international news to wrap up the update. One positive and one negative. Let's do the positive one. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky has proposed trading captured Kursk Oblast territory with Russia for Ukrainian land as part of peace negotiations. Quote, we will swap one territory for another. Russia currently controls 20% of Ukraine, including Crimea and Eastern territories seized since 2014. Putin demands that Ukraine recognize Russian control of 4 territories and abandon NATO aspirations. President Trump is working to broker peace talks, having extended his initial 24-hour timetable to end the war to 100 days. How very generous of him to give himself that leeway. Top officials, including Vice President Vance, Secretary of State Marco Rubio, and Ukraine envoy Keith Kellogg, will meet with allies at the Munich Security Conference this week. I wanted to include this because we've been covering Ukraine stuff for entering into our 3rd year. And I have never heard a framework for peace from Zelensky. It's something I've been waiting for. Usually these kinds of things happen pretty slowly, and sometimes you see some trial balloons, and then eventually there is some kind of hammering things out. Like there's no such thing as a wild last minute peace agreement to end a war. Like the speed might shock you, but the terms, there's no Luca trades happening with this kind of deal. The parameters. The question is where it's going to land, because the details become obviously a matter of life and death when you're talking about a war either continuing or stopping. Still, I think it's positive. Positive for me to hear it. And finally, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened to end the ceasefire and restart intense fighting if Hamas does not free Israeli hostages by noon on Saturday. He claimed Hamas's threat to delay the next hostage release violates the truce. Meanwhile, President Trump has issued a similar ultimatum saying that all Israeli hostages must be released or all hell would break out. 16 of the 33 hostages have been freed. Many others remain in Gaza. The conflict has killed over 48,000 Palestinians and displaced millions, according to estimates. Trump's proposal to relocate 2 million Palestinians from Gaza has fueled pushback. Meanwhile, the families of hostages urge continued negotiations and not renewed war. So that's the bad one. I said there was a good one and a bad one, and I'm going to define good and bad based on whether or not wars are ending or whether or not they are continuing. All of this boils down to Hamas saying that Israel has not held up to their end of the bargain when it comes to the ceasefire. They say that there were supplies that were supposed to come in to Gaza that have not come into Gaza. I don't know whether or not that's true. I don't know that I would particularly trust anyone to know whether or not that was true. But still, any ceasefire between these two sides are going to be tenuous. It's just no other way to say that. And so this one is. Donald Trump obviously upped the ante by saying, look, all the hostages need to be out, or else I'm going to pour gasoline on this fire. And he did it, by the way, sitting next to the president of Jordan, which is something. But, I don't want to go too far down the road. It's Tuesday as I record this. It'll be Wednesday when you hear it. And we're talking about something that's going to happen Saturday. In the world of Trump diplomacy, well, anything can happen. And that is your update. TakePoliticsSeriously.com, where you need to go if you want to support this show. Again, get 2 bonus episodes each and every week, including one on Monday, one on Thursday, to keep you up to date. We'll keep you up. And now, Mr. Kirk Bado. Here to make sense of this even more is National Journal's Hotline Zone, Kirk Bado. How you doing, buddy?
Justin, anytime I get to touch up with you, I know I'm doing something right, man.
So I just laid out for the listeners that the best way that I can understand what we've seen over the last 3 weeks and counting as we come up on our first month of Trump 47 is to really look back to 1992. He's got Ross Perot's verve for reforming the government, Pat Buchanan's immigration strategy, and I'm blatantly stealing this take from our friend Michael Cohen, who wrote for 24 Site today, that he is using Bill Clinton's strategy of 80-20 issues to kind of be the little bit of sugar to make the medicine go down. If we're going to look at that, I think it's kind of hard for us to not revisit the conversation we had a few weeks ago that warned everybody then that don't look at this administration the way that we looked at the 45th administration that was stepping on every rake possible. How would you describe it? Competent has a loaded term. How would you describe what we've seen in the last 3 weeks from the administration?
During the last few weeks, I have been thinking a lot about that episode that we did, that conversation we had just a few days before the inauguration about what does a competent Trump administration look like. And the mile markers that we set there were legislative victories and the ease of enacting his agenda. And one of the things that I'm thinking about a lot is how effective they have been at rolling out the executive orders. This is an insane pace right now of executive action. It's dizzying how much activity he's doing, and they're also free from the scandal of that specter of the Russian investigation that was hanging over the first administration right from the jump. They're not encumbered by that. They don't have that cloud hanging over them. They're really able to move shockingly effectively throughout the bureaucracy right now. In fact, I think we kind of underestimated. You were one of the first people on trying to theorize what a competent Trump administration would look like. And I think we kind of underestimated just how effective that they would be here and how professional they are at moving through these sort of very bureaucratic, filled with red tape areas of the federal government.
And look, they're wielding chainsaws. So it's not like, I think that's the thing is when some people think of it, it's like, oh, competent is deliberate. This is not deliberate. This is breakneck. This is like as fast as I think we've ever seen government move in my lifetime. Like there's nothing ever goes like this. And even if they're hitting these legal guardrails, I think they have decent shots at overturning it. And if they don't, they have other ways to go around it. It's like if they get stopped in this version of it, this is what they're doing with half of their departments even appointed. So it's like, what happens when everybody's appointed? It looks like they're going to get everybody from their cabinet in. they're just going to move through that way about it. So it's like even the legal side of it, which is what's sucking up a lot of oxygen right now, I don't think that it's a really competent roadblock. And that's before we get into some of the other stuff. Like legislatively, we have no idea what's happening. Everything I've heard from the Hill. Yeah. Everything I've heard from the Hill is that there is no legislative North Star. And so everybody is fighting. So nothing's going to get done until the room gets lit on fire and they're like 5 days past their final drop deadline.
Right. Well, I think we're sitting here about a month out from when the government funding expires. We're well on our way to a shutdown. And I think the question right now is not if we're having a shutdown, but how long it's going to be. And I think that's going to be the first really big roadblock to this competent Trump framework that we're working with here. Because he's been able to get all his most controversial cabinet nominees through. You know, it looks like Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. are going to get confirmed later this week here. Hegseth got through. The only one that was difficult was Matt Gaetz, and it seemed like there was a lot more going on outside of just the
that was a pretty quick switcheroo there.
Yeah, and they again effectively just almost like a NASCAR pit stop where they went into the lane and they just switched out the tires. They switched out Gaetz for Pam Bondi, and no issue at all.
And we didn't hear anything. I mean, like, look, here's the difference between Trump 45 and 47. Maggie Haberman's writing about the fact that he keeps talking about a third term. Mm-hmm. That's something I could write. That's something you could write. There is not the same level of Trump said to this person that he was on the phone with at 3:00 in the morning, and then the conference called in Sean Hannity, and then they talked about it. That was the kind of stuff we were getting with 45. We're not getting any of that now. Like, sure, Trump is still saying crazy stuff. He is still going beyond the pale of what any American president has said as he openly muses about, you know, clearing people out of Gaza so he can set up a couple of golf courses. But like, that's almost like a side dish to everything else that, I mean, even for the Democratic side, the stuff that they're focusing on are Elon and Doge. And even
then, like, they're not. Going back to your earlier point about just how effective and quick they're moving right now, quicker than any other modern president has even like dreamed of. I don't think the systems we have in place right now are built for this type of roughshod government reform. Let's call it that. I mean, think about like the Democrats, for example, that after that week that they had the federal funding freeze, that in between the White House issuing the freeze, a judge blocking it, and the White House sort of rescinding it, the Democrats couldn't even get together to have a meeting to discuss their response here. Yeah. Like, they're not built for this. And the systems of government that we have in place right now, from the legislative branch to the judiciary, is getting pushed pretty heavily right now. I mean, if you look at the headlines of any of the newsletters this morning, it was about this looming constitutional crisis we're having. I mean, he's been so effective and so efficient this time around that he's pushing the legal limits of the three branches of government right now to the breaking point.
Yeah, which, you know, this was my same thing with Doge last week, where it was like, I do feel like I need to take a step back with some of the hyperbole, because this is pretty much all that the Democrats have right now. And that was even laid out in a letter from Schumer this week, where he's like, look, all we have is complaining, lawsuits, and messaging. That's pretty much it. That's what we have. And so now this last week it was Doge. Doge is not allowed to do this. Now there were some favorable rulings, at least in the interim, for people who are opposing what is happening right now with the federal government. And so the issue is constitutional crisis. It is okay. Well, will they go along with it? They seem to be. They, being the Trump administration, seem to be. Now they're not saying that out loud. Elon is loudly saying there should be an Andrew Jackson moment, and J.D. Vance is hinting toward some of the same in terms of complaining about the rulings. But complaining about the rulings are not illegal. Complaining about the rulings are not a constitutional crisis. It is whether or not they take action on it. And right now, I don't know if they're going to really have to. I think that there's plenty of rope for them to swing around when it comes to stuff like this. None of the rulings that have come down, I think, are particularly permanent or damning to what they want to do.
No, they're not. They're more just stays on it for right now as people figure out the constitutionality of some of these. For example, a lot of them have to do with Congress has appropriated this funding for X, Y, Z. Elon, is it appropriate for the executive branch to come in then and say, we're not funding X, Y, Z now? And that's just going to drag everything out for months. It's the same tactic that Trump used with all his legal stuff during the campaign as well to flood the zone with appeals, to really muddy the waters here and drag out these fights in the courts as long as possible. He did the same thing in his business practices as well. It's using the systems that we have in place right now and pushing them to their breaking point. And that's what we're going to see, I think. Again, everything he is doing right now has been completely under the control of the executive branch. It's all been executive branch action here. When the rubber meets the road in a month, when the funding runs out, that's, I think, going to be the first real challenge here, because that's going to be about keeping the government open. Yes, we're doing slash and burn right now with the chainsaws, like you were saying, but it's going to be an entirely different thing when folks their checks start bouncing, when it's bare bones at the airport towers, with the tragedy in D.C. hanging in the background here. That's when it's going to be a real test of the competency of Trump's leadership and of Republicans' leadership in Congress as well, because that's not something you can that's not something you can just throw in the courts and try to run out the clock.
Well, here's the other thing that I don't know, and because this is so unprecedented, I don't know how seriously people are going to take it, but you got a lot of budget hawks. Everything I'm hearing out of Capitol Hill is the Republicans are totally in disarray. They have no common thread. The word that I was told was Republicans can't agree on math. There are some that believe that the Congressional Budget Office score on stuff like the Trump tax cuts are real. There are others who say, well, it's real, but they were way far off on what it was going to be when we first passed it. Why would we take them seriously now if they're going to score it as a gigantic deficit? And then there are some who believe it doesn't matter. They're already here. It's not going to cost us more money if it is already a thing that's been in place for 5 years. I will not listen to anything that the Congressional Budget Office says on extended Trump tax cuts. So it's like, that's just the fiscal side. But if we're going to focus there and you look at what's happening with Doge, what I wonder is, will that have any purchase on some of these fiscal hawks? If they say, all right, I believe that these cuts are real. I believe that these things are not going to be in the budget that's going to come up for the next year. I believe that we are saving everything that is on the Doge Twitter account. Then in that case, are they more willing to say, all right, let's not shut down the government? Or when you are looking at the big, beautiful bill as the Trump administration wants, are they going to be more willing to say, okay, I'm going to give up on some of my priorities? Probably not Thomas Massie, but the rest of them, I mean, they have 2 votes to give up right now. So you have Thomas Massie and a buddy that are allowed to pout.
That's the thing. You have zero room for error at all, and it's just going to get narrower once Elise Stefanik leaves as well. When she's
I think two is going to be the bottom, right? Two is where it's hard capped, at least until somebody dies, which usually at least one person dies in the House. Not that I'm wishing death on anybody, but that's tough until they're the special election, the 2 special elections in Florida. Then they would get back to 4 and then 5 when the Stefanik special election happened.
Yeah, and those special elections in Florida aren't until April 1st. So you have to have this whole negotiation going on right now with, again, a 2-person room for error here. And, Thomas Massie's already said that he's going to be – I don't think he's going to compromise at all. You have Chip Roy as well, who's been one of the biggest hawks as well here. He doesn't seem like he's going to bat down anytime soon. There's only so much carrot and sticks that you can offer these people here, and that's going to be a real test for Johnson and Trump. And frankly, with how the negotiations have been going now and the reports out of the GOP House retreat down in Florida, which didn't really amount to any movement at all. We're still in this purgatory right now. I would not be very hopeful, and I think the safest bet right now, like if you were doing FanDuel lines here, is that there is going to be some sort of government shutdown for at least a day or two.
Now,
in March.
Here's the other side of that. Let's do shutdown politics. The Democrats have been out protesting every day en masse. I don't know if it's the best thing for their brand. They don't normally produce the best clips, so maybe they should stop doing these 50-person gang protests where they all get their 10 minutes to spout off about whatever they want. But that is what they are doing.
No, and
will they be able to resist saying that they shut down the government because they believe that this is a rogue whatever, everything that they're saying at these things? That was Schumer was already trying to warn them. Let's not own the shutdown. Let's not own the shutdown. But you only say that if you're worried that there are voices within your party that say they want to own the shutdown because they think it's going to be good politics.
The taking the credit and or blame for the shutdown is going to play out over the next few weeks here for sure. And, I keep going back to that Schumer interview he did with Semaphore where he, is basically saying, look, we can't do a whole lot right now like what you were saying earlier. Just wait for Trump to screw up here. When you own all three branches of government, you own the shutdown here. There's going to be some Democrats who might want to go out there and get ahead of it and say, we shut the government down based on principle here. That is not a position I think Schumer wants anybody to be in. I do think that there might be some people who try to get ahead of that, but I think the brunt of the blame here is going to be on Republicans, and it's going to be on Trump, just like the shutdown during his first term. That pain was felt by Republicans and by the administration. I see a repeat of that happening. We're talking all about how the differences between 45 and 47 are, but I think that's going to play out very similarly to how it did 4 years ago.
I don't know where the Republicans find a legislative leader. Theoretically, this is the time and place where, now Mitch McConnell's not walking through that door. There's no Paul Ryan who wants to be the guy who is digging into the nuts and bolts. The old leadership, including Kevin McCarthy, that say what you will about him, that he made too many promises and he didn't keep them, but he knew that he had to go into rooms and make promises to get things over the finish line. Everyone's gone. And while Mike Johnson is not quite the greenhorn that he was during the last term, he is not a seasoned Speaker of the House in the way that his predecessors have been. It doesn't appear that there's a lot of the loudest voices are the blow it up voices and not the, hey guys, let's all get this stuff together. I don't know who it is. It's certainly not the White House. The White House isn't going to sit there and comb through things in the way that maybe some in the past would. But that's really where I think if we're going to say that, especially the executive branch has been operating, knowing where the right and the left hand are, the biggest time bomb there is what is happening in the House specifically.
Absolutely. There's no adults in the room here. And anyone who tries to be an adult in the legislative room there, like take James Langford, for example, who in the last Congress negotiated that bipartisan border bill that had a lot of buy-in from Republicans and Democrats, but because Trump didn't want to give Biden an election year win, he came out against it, and the bill got torpedoed here. So anyone who even tries to put their neck out right now is liable. If it's almost like it's a no man's land situation here. It's trench warfare between the Democrats and Republicans. And if you're a Republican trying to go out into that no man's land in the middle, you're more likely than not going to get cut down by friendly fire than anything from Democrats right now. I mean, that's the situation right now. There's no incentive for compromise. There's no incentive right now for reaching out. And there's no one willing to even open those talks right now because of this very narrow divide they have right now and how Trump just does not hesitate to cut your legs out from underneath you.
Can I ask you this? What the hell is going on with Nancy Mace? Like, do we need a wellness check on Nancy Mace right now? Like, she, just for people catching up, there's a clip of her, you can find it on the internet, where she is, using the colloquial term for an engine transmission over and over and over again, like it's an Xbox Live chat room. And then last night, in what can be described many ways. You could describe it as something that is potentially brave. You could describe it as something that is reckless. I think that most media is describing it as legally actionable, which is why you're not going to see a lot of coverage about it, because she used her privilege to speak on the House to name names and I think give phone numbers for people that she says sexually assaulted her and other women. Nobody's running with that because they don't want to get sued for doing it. That is legal to do on the House floor. It is not legal to do in other channels. But she is on one. I have no idea what is going on with her.
We a little bit behind the curtain here. We struggled with how to frame all that in our newsletters this morning, and we went with the approach that you're outlining here. We talked about that she gave this floor speech, accused her ex-husband and a few people associated with him with sexual assault, and then named the South Carolina Attorney General, who she might be running against in the gubernatorial primary down there next year, as being ineffective and inactive and not acting on multiple complaints about sexual assault and sexual harassment. Nancy Mace is one of the most interesting characters. I covered her first congressional run. I covered her when she was running for Senate all those years ago. Mm-hmm. And to see this transformation into this creature who feeds off the sunlight of cameras has been absolutely mind-boggling with how quick it has happened here. And I think, again, she is not playing for any one audience. You got a lot of moves that some of these folks make in Congress. You can say they're going for an audience of one, and that one person is Donald Trump. Yeah, this is for one person and one person only, and it's really for her. And I don't, because this comes off of what you were saying about the comments in the committee, the speech last night, her dying on the hill, the bathroom stuff. Yeah, like it is. She's in a very safe seat in South Carolina. She wants to run for governor. She keeps teasing everything there. It's really a big play for attention, and I don't know how we should necessarily handle this as media right now, because like you said, she's making very serious accusations, but is it responsible to repeat them? Is it responsible to go and start calling those phone numbers up and doing our own fact checking here? I don't know. It really just blows my mind how she has been able to make herself the main character in every few news cycles.
I mean, I saw the clip of the preamble yesterday. Yeah. And it's very, I want to use careful wording here because I genuinely, she is a survivor of sexual assault. That has been part of her story for a very long time. Oh, absolutely. She was naming the people that did it. So I do not want to make it seem like that is something that I'm against. But it was very grandstandy, the intro to it. It was very, the line that she used was, "I'm going to burn bridges and let that fire light the way forward." She put her hand on the Bible. There was a theatrical. There
were props. There were props. Props up there.
There was a theatrical element to what was going on, regardless of the message. And then I was like, the preamble ends, the C-SPAN clip ends, and I'm like, what the hell is she talking about? And then I look it up, and I'm like, Jesus, what is going on? And now the question is, is she going to repeat that when she's not on the floor? Because there's protected speech on the floor that goes beyond what you are allowed to say as a citizen outside that chamber. But I don't know. I mean, maybe she's just not long for the House. She's going to run for governor, and she just wants to be, this is all about name recognition. Maybe there is that cynical element of, she knows who she's going to run against. So let's make sure that we put it on the record that she blames her for, or blames or a future opponent for not responding fast enough to these kinds of awful allegations. But it's something. There was not too long ago that Nancy Mace was thought of as a moderate member of the House. She was thought of as this kind of window into the suburbs, but Who knows, man? Who knows what's going on with her now?
Well, that's like when her Charleston-based district got redrawn to be much more safer for Republicans. That's where you saw this huge pivot from her, because when she was running when it was a swing district against Joe Cunningham, it was much more that moderate view into a suburban woman who, has been like the prototypical swing voter for the past 20 years or so. And then now we have this really, really hard pivot to where she's really just about a lot of the attention and getting into the attention economy right now. And while you were talking there, I was thinking a lot about the Newt Gingrich's revolution, when he really leveraged the floor speaking privileges and the power of our friends over at C-SPAN broadcasting gavel to gavel coverage all the time to increase his name ID nationally, to make a national conservative network that eventually culminated in him being speaker. And what we might be seeing here right now from Mace is using that same platform and those same privileges to do basically a 2025 version of that right now. And again, I'm trying not to discount her story or discount her claims, but it's hard sometimes to really deal with the substance of what she's saying when the form it's coming in is like this, with this massive preamble, with the props, with only saying these things while using the protected speech you have on the floor of the House here right now. And if that she really wanted to hold some of these people to account, there are other additional ways you can do that besides making a huge floor speech that she teased out over the course of about a week or so. On Twitter as well. Like it was like almost like I thought she was announcing a run for governor here, and I tune in and it was this. And she knows how to leverage the media. Sometimes it's very ham-fisted, but I think she's doing it
not
the best she can with the tools. It's definitely not subtle at all. And I just wonder what the end game is here.
And journalistically, I got some real questions, because initially my thought is like, well, she said it on the House floor. You got to repeat it. Like enough of this. Like, this is one of these things that I do think that journalism in general has gotten a little bit too squishy on, is kind of mushing up the peas for the right, as opposed to just saying like, here's what happened. Do with it what you will. Like, we're not here to tell you if it's good or bad. We're here to tell you what happened. This is what happened. But at the same time, nobody is going to want to dig through the whatever facts of those cases are. Going back to my Com 101 or my Com law class, like what really gets you in trouble with these kinds of cases, if any of those people were to sue the outlet that repeated it, including this show, they would have to prove that I knew that it was false before I repeated it. And I think that journalistically, you should be legally able to say that I don't know if it is true or false. I know that a congresswoman said it on the House floor.
On the floor of the United States Congress.
Like, you should be able to repeat it. But almost everybody that I've read today has kind of put up their hands and said like, she said a thing. We're not going to repeat exactly what she said, and we're certainly not going to repeat the names. So do with that what you will.
Right. Well, I mean, it's also like, in a more ideal world, we would have that type of protection and everything. But with the media environment right now, and, the press freedom's getting pressured from the White House to bring this all the way back to Trump, it's a lot more sensible, I think, for media outlets, us at Hotline, here on Politics as well, to tread a little bit more on the side of caution, especially when we're dealing with these. It's like explosive doesn't even do it justice. These allegations of just rampant sexual assault that are just mind-boggling.
Maybe, I don't know. Maybe I'll just run it and see if I can leverage Substack to pay my lawyer bill. I really do go back and forth with it. I really do, because, and this is, all right, let's real quick, I'll keep the media stuff brief. Like, this is the reason why, like, with those cases that you were talking about with the White House, with like CBS and, the Des Moines Register and stuff like that, they're settling these cases that were being brought by Trump alleging.
Which is a horrible precedent. Horrible precedent.
It's a horrible precedent. It's a really, really bad precedent. And here's why. They're doing it because they want to avoid discovery. They want to avoid what happened with Fox News when the Dominion lawsuit came in. And so they were able to get discovery, and a bunch of, dirty laundry from text messages and emails became public knowledge. They want to avoid that. And I don't think that it's necessarily even proof positive that they are biased or colluding or whatever, but they just don't want to happen what happened to Tucker Carlson, what happened to Fox News, to just have all your private stuff become public. And so they're settling. And that's a terrible, terrible precedent, especially if you're CBS, because the only reason why I will defend big tent mainstream journalistic entities, CBS, New York Times, Wall Street Journal, all these places, they matter if only for this reason. You guys have the money to buy lawyers. You guys have the money to keep lawyers on retainer. You're supposed to be the ones that are taking the bullets and are fighting. And if it means that you guys have to get embarrassed, that people have to have their text messages dumped out, well, then be better with having burners and keep stuff off the radar. Like there's ways that you can do it that protect everybody downstream, because that is the chilling effect. The chilling effect is, oh man, the Des Moines Register ran a really, really awful poll that Trump saw as voter suppression, so he sued him. And instead of actually going to court and fighting it and spending all the money on lawyers, they settled. CBS, whether or not you think that the CBS stuff was maliciously edited or it just falls within the realm of television spots have X amount of time that they have to run stuff. That's up to you. CBS should have never settled that. So CBS should have fought for it just for the precedent of this is why we exist, right? We exist to defend these freedoms. It's really, really sad, because this is the thing, is that now I got to look at my 6-figure budget. National Journal has to look at their, possibly 7-figure budget, whatever, and say, that's a lot bigger a percentage of what comes out of our stuff than it would be for CBS, which is possibly looking at, several $100 million that they can play with every year. And they probably already have dedicated, tens of millions of dollars to lawyers that they keep on retainer for a variety of different reasons. And so that's frustrating, because there should be more coverage of what Nancy Mace said on the House floor, because it's hard, because it is a sticky thing to say. Now, I think you could probably report it once and then not, say the names over and over and over again, unless those names want to countersue. But or they want to bring attention to themselves. But the initial thing, the first time it happens, it was on the House floor. Yeah,
you should be able to say it.
You should be able to say it.
And look, bringing this all back around and everything, one of the biggest differences, again, between 45 and 47 right now is that there's just a lot less journalism outlets willing to take that risk and do that type of accountability work that we're talking about here, because of the chilling effect of the precedents being set that CBS is settling, that the Des Moines Register can get sued for having a bad poll out there the weekend.
A Seltzer poll. It was a crap Seltzer poll, but Seltzer polls usually are, Trump sued them because Seltzer had a good reputation. If it were patriot.info or trumpsucks.biz that put out a Iowa was going to go blue poll, then nobody would care. It was because of Seltzer.
Exactly. And if that all can happen, and then there's a chilling effect to smaller outlets like what we are at National Journal, or you over here at Substack as well, where you're thinking, look, if the big guys aren't able to take this, what can I do here? Then the trickle down is then like we're worried about reporting on stuff that was said in the most public space in the United States Congress, because we're worried about potential blowback here. That's a bad place to be in a media environment, and I think one of the biggest differences as well between 45 and 47 is the chilling effect that we have.
Yeah, I do think part of it was inevitable. It's inevitable as you spread the media out further that you're going to have less people that are just going to say, screw it. Like we're going to fight this. We're going to fight the White House. We're going to fight the most powerful person in the world. Now, when you look at the Washington Post has replaced leadership, twice over the last year. CNN has flipped leadership. The New York Times is in turmoil. Everybody's looking at their bottom line and wondering exactly where the money's coming from. This is just a bad time to be a swashbuckler when it comes to saying, no, I'm going to pick the fight for the sake of picking the fight, even though, from our perspective, way down the chain, we're like, I mean, better you than I. If I just fight a lawsuit, I might be like struggling to pay my rent tomorrow. You could fight a lawsuit and maybe down the road in the next few quarters, you got to worry about stuff, but it's not going to be anything that is going to affect you today.
Exactly. And who are the swashbucklers now? I think a lot about the decision that BuzzFeed made and Ben Smith made to publish the Steele dossier.
Yeah.
I don't think,
which I thought was great. I thought was amazing, because even if you're from the side that you thought the Steele dossier was BS, it was way better to have it all out there in the street than to have people like CNN was doing, where you were dripping it and saying like, oh, there's a secret file, and the secret file says these things. It's like, no, throw it all out in the street. Everybody read it and they're like, oh, this is kind of silly. I don't know how serious I take this.
No, I'm happy that it was published. Now, if I was in charge of an outlet like that, would I publish it? I don't know. I think about that decision a lot, and I think about the justification that Ben Smith made to publish it. I thought it was sound reasoning, and I'm happy that it was out there, and that wasn't just like we were saying earlier, that we didn't have someone mash our peas for us and so just gave us the whole stock ready to go there. But I don't see what outlets are doing that type of swashbuckle, damn the torpedoes approach this cycle. Which is
how
unfortunate.
Freaked out. What are the vibes in DC? Because I was watching the Sunday shows this week, and I often say that the Sunday shows are where DC talks to itself. So it's not necessarily always the most nutritious thing, but if you want to know what DC is talking about, like that is a good place to get a window into it. And I would describe it as just high anxiety. It is just like DC is a government place, and if you're firing government workers, then that's a factory town that is not happy. Describe the vibes.
You're exactly right. It's a company town, and the company's the government. And the government right now there's an unpredictable just force moving through it, and with a chainsaw, like we were saying earlier, and slashing and burning here. It feels a lot like, when I talk to my friends who work in the federal government, when I talk to folks who are connected with that or could be under the auspice of the Doge cuts. It's like Jimmy Butler in the bubble finals, where he was the only healthy Heat player, and there's that picture of him on the standee on the side, just head in his hands, just exhausted. Yeah, I mean we've
better days for my beloved Jimmy Butler.
Look, a Warriors legend, Jimmy Butler, Sixers legend, Jimmy Butler.
Exactly.
But that's really the mood right now, is just exhaustion. And we here, even at National Journal, we're feeling a little bit of the pinch too, because we're a organization that also has a separate end of our business that does deal with government contracts for our legislative tracking tools and our data that we have and compile for federal agencies. So when there was that big uproar last week over the Politico Pro
canceling all the media contracts,
exactly. We're not on the same level as Politico, but we do have a not insignificant amount of government contracts as well for services that we provide, and some people subscribe to our journalism as well here. So we're looking at that as well. This is a company town that really thrives on consistency, and this last month has been anything but consistent, and it's thrown a lot of people off the wagon.
And that's really the balance, because in the first segment I talked a lot about how popular, from the people's perspective, shrinking the federal government has been since the 90s, right? And probably before, but that's when I wanted to track it, was from 92. It's something that is a consistent. People believe that less money should be spent by the government and less people should work for the government, kind of bar none. But as you pointed out, when you're in the city, when you're in the district, and it thrives on consistency. That
Right.
A is something that you want in a competent government. You don't want it to be roiling around and chaotic, but at the same time, consistency for consistency's sake can, and I think has, led to bloat. And so when everything is just consistent and hiring and consistent and hiring and consistent and hiring, you get to the situations that you're at now. But at the same time, like, what I want to impress to people, and especially the blow it up people, is like, that town is all interconnected. Like, you either know people that are in the government or work for an organization that talks about the government and oftentimes gets paid by the government down the road. So yeah, it is. It's
a lot of uncertainty right now. And it's again, these folks aren't just like, political appointees, or they're not like, the Hill staffers you see, going in and out every summer here. It's folks who have put like their whole careers into public service, bought houses, have families, and have tried to make a living out of the federal government, just like anyone else in a company town does. If you're in West Virginia and it's a mining town, if you're in Nashville and it's healthcare, like, this is the industry here. This is what people have really staked their family's future on, and they're really worried about the stability that they have grown accustomed to, and how this has just thrown everything out the window.
And that's the thing, is that there's, there are some where it's like, well, like, sucks to suck because they have an adversarial relationship with the government. But that is certainly not the opinion when you are actually the one getting paid. You have bet your life on the idea that this is going to be here.
Well, this isn't like some deep state agent sitting in the Pentagon, at the computer right now, like censoring tweets or something
monitoring this very podcast for possible seditious.
Exactly. Hello, FBI agents. It's folks who are working like in the VA, like as folks who are filing insurance claims. It's people working in, the Department of Defense, just doing logistics. Like, these are people who have like the most mundane jobs that just keep the wheels rolling here. It's not like they're rooting out nefarious actors here who are trying to sabotage Mr. Trump. Like, this is the idea that this is some vast and insidious conspiracy is just, everything's a conspiracy when you don't know how it works.
Yeah, I do want to point out that the vibe is uncertainty, though. It is uncertainty and not despair, because whenever you are going after an organization that is as tangled and messy as the federal government, like, which it is unquestionably, like a large sprawling bureaucracy where even people inside don't particularly understand where all the wires connect. And if you are trying to find waste, fraud, and abuse that undoubtedly exists, that nobody really debates whether it exists, they debate where it exists, that anytime you are going through this kind of stuff, the entire organization is going to say, wait, you're doing surgery on me? Like, while I'm awake? Like, this is crazy. But nobody knows where it's going to come out. Nobody knows exactly what these agencies are going to look like on the other side. You have apocalyptic views that we're going to strip it down, and not only, this isn't trimming the fat, it's breaking the bones. Like, this is a terrible idea. And then you've got the other side that's like, look, we're cutting a very manageable portion out of this, and by the time that the dust has settled, everything's going to run better. It's going to run more efficient. You're actually going to be able to get things done faster than you had before. And we just don't know. The answer is likely going to be somewhere on that scale, but we have no idea if it's going to be on one of the poles or somewhere in the middle. It's
again, I cannot impress us enough that it's just rampant uncertainty. That's why you have people like breathlessly watching some of these reports about, the DOJ officials have entered the Treasury Department. The DOJ officials have entered the Social Security office. People are breathlessly following that all the time in town here about what, I think it was there was that anonymous quote from an administration official in Axios when they were talking about cutting the media contracts. Yeah. That was like the eye of Sauron is on the media right now. Everybody wants to stay out of the eye of Sauron right now, and they're trying to hide like hobbits right now.
Which is funny, because the Politico thing wasn't even DOJ. That was just the media or the fervor that people have had on X for like,
Right.
like now we're all amateur government waste hunters and let's go on usspending.gov and look like, name I don't like. Look at this name I don't like, getting money.
But when Elon sees that and says, "Oh, you know what? That's interesting. I'll look into that." I mean, what's the difference then between just the loudest voices on X and the Doge officials? There's no line there. When they can elevate something to that level, they can get to the chief first buddy, Elon Musk, and then he can train his eye on the media contracts there. I mean, that's the strange and uncertain place that we are right now, where people are trying to just avoid any attention at all, at least in some of these federal agencies.
Yeah, it was getting into the middle of that Politico Pro stuff was fascinating because I was not familiar with the product. I didn't even know what I was talking about, nor do I think most people who are having these conversations in loud tones knew what the hell Politico Pro was. But the big thing that I found out was that by and large, most people don't like it. They think it kind of sucks. And it was described to me as they said it's basically gatekeeping for people that aren't in the know but want to be in the know on Capitol Hill. Like, you can buy yourself access to pretending like you know what the hell is going on because the most like titter-tattery gossip that isn't even really printable on Politico gets reported breathlessly on Politico Pro, and you too at a Georgetown cocktail party can say, "Oh, did you hear about de minimis?" And then say it's Politico Pro. And basically you're just saying, I have an expense account. That's all you're really saying is I am in a position where I have an expense account.
Well, and look, you talk about status symbols in town here. That's chief among them is to be in the know like that. They also offer certain data tools to agencies as well that they do a nice job with and everything. But if I keep talking about Politico Pro, I'm going to get in trouble here.
I heard it was like a fifth place product. That yes, it does have those things. It does not do any of those things particularly well. The thing that it does the best is be called Politico, and so it has a reputation for the gossip kind of stuff, like the directory, the vote tracking. That's all done better in other things that are cleaner and more efficient than Politico Pro. So that was like the biggest thing that I found was that it's not that necessarily it's a bad tool. It's not that it's awful. It is just not as high a quality as others. And so the larger question could and should be that if people in these agencies are spending the money, do you need 5 different redundant tools, especially if they're going from anywhere between $1,500 a year to $10,000 a year?
And that's kind of where the Doge mission comes in, and is actually the one that you saw the initial buy-in from Democrats on, is stamping out some of those redundancies there. But now that it's kind of just been a whack-a-mole of whatever federal program or whatever floats up in front of Musk, you see some Democrats starting to abandon that here. And again, I'm not trying to sing the virtues of Politico Pro and everything like that, but the reason we're talking about this right now is because it was elevated up to Musk on some pretty shaky reasoning here, and that type of uncertainty, this type of no fact checking at all, that it was just like an internet rumor that bubbled up, and Politico actually was really slow to respond on it. It took him like 2 days to put out a statement here. Again, the institutions are just not ready for how quick things move now, that they're worried that any sort of project, people in town here are worried that any sort of project they're connected to, any sort of agency that they do business with, could also be the next Politico Pro right now. And I mean that in not a complimentary way. Yeah.
And that's the push and pull, because all this stuff happened and it wasn't like it was flagged for the American public when the Politico Pro tab went up to 8.2 million, which is what the figure that wound up becoming the big red flag was. Like, wait, $8 million?
That's my taxpayer dollars going to Politico. Why are you doing this?
And so it's like, I heard somebody who launched Politico Pro hit me up and said, initially I'm like, okay, well, at the list price, quote unquote, at $10,000, that's 800 licenses for Politico Pro at 8.2. I was told that it is heavily discounted for the government. It's more in the 1,000 to 2,000 per seat range. So that would effectively be like for everybody in the government. Like you would have, wide access to it at 8 million. But it's like, that didn't have to pass any, it was not flagged for the American public. Hey, do we need $8 million a year worth of Politico Pro subscriptions?
There's no ballot referendum on Politico Pro.
No. Yeah. It is unelected has become the new, the new buzzword in town. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. This is, it's fascinating because like many things in government, this is something that probably could have gone in a more orderly fashion if people could have gotten their stuff together. And I don't even just mean Doge now. I just mean like over the last 20 years as people have said, hey, the government's too big. We're spending too much money. We're too far in debt. Maybe we should think about cleaning our house. On both sides, you've had multiple different switches of Republican and Democrat control of government, the executive branch, the legislative branch. We've done this in every configuration that you could possibly want. Nobody's ever really done anything about it. Mm-hmm. And yet the will of the people is such that they have wanted it. And now you've got Doge and big balls running through the federal government.
Only the best and brightest. Only the best and brightest.
Only the biggest and ballsiest. All right. Kirk Bado of National Journal's Hotline. Where can people find you?
First off, thanks for having me on, buddy. I love
always
coming here and talking shop with you. I'm on all the usual socials, Blue Sky, Twitter at Kirk Bado. And I also recently joined Substack, actually, just to do a little... Yeah, I'm drinking the Substack Kool-Aid right now. It's going down. It's going down smooth. I'm Kirk Bado on there. I just do like a little newsletter that collects my stuff that I'm doing for National Journal and send it out to folks because I'm trying to explore new platforms here. And the success that you've had here has really intrigued me. So I wanted to dip my toe in the water here.
Welcome
so far.
Welcome to the burgeoning world of Substackery. To you, Kirk Bado. Thank you so much, man.
Thank you, sir. I'll talk to you later.
And that'll wrap it up for us today. Politics, written and hosted by me, Justin Robert Young, for Dog and Pony Show Audio in Austin, Texas. You can email theyoungamerican@gmail.com. Find and follow us on the various social media platforms, TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter is Justin R. Young. YouTube is Politics. And you can support us, paypal.me/payjury. One-time donation. You just want to hit us off with a little hello. Thank you. I appreciate it. Venmo is Justin-Young-20. Cash App is PX3Cash. And you can send me anything you'd like in the mail. Post Office Box 153184, Austin, Texas, 78715. You can only get our bonus content at TakePoliticsSeriously.com. That's where you find our Substack. Paying members get 2 bonus episodes each and every week delivered to them automatically. Either $3 a week or $99 for one entire year. That's under 50 episodes of PX3 for under $100. But it is only at our founding tier that you get your name read at the end of the podcast, like these fine folks in our Titanic founding tier. L3PO, Peepaw, Scott, Middle-Aged Mike, Tom, Sarah Jeannie, Jeremy, Pro Idiot, Chiller Tomatoes, oh yeah, it's Adam, Neil, AB Puppy, Just Another Pilot, Dr. Whiskey, Michael, Fat Tony's PJs from New York, Will, The Borge B, Matthew, Matt, Andrew, Edwin, Sam, Andrew, Phil, Edison, Devon, Paul, a dog named Checkers, Gloria, my mom, Jerry, Trucker, John, Berkeley, and Berkeley Stephen, and Zombie Doc. You want your name read on the show? One place to do it, TakePoliticsSeriously.com. On the next episode of Politics in the main feed, in the free feed, we will welcome back 2 of our favorites, Dave Leventhal and Matt Laszlo. Matt Laszlo is in Congress. I want to know, are any of these Doge things affecting the conversation about Donald Trump's legislative goals in Congress? Because you got a lot of budget hardliners And now you're seeing a lot of big numbers coming out of Doge, whether or not they believe in it. I want to know if they believe in it, right? That's what I want to know. I want to know if some of these budget hardliners who are like, not a penny over, if they're like, hey, look, if we're saving billions of dollars, can you adjust your not a penny over to, the billions of dollars that we're saving? Because if they don't believe it, I want to know why. Matt Laszlo is going to help us answer that. And Dave Leventhal has a great lobbying story that while there are a lot of priorities that Donald Trump wants, there are a lot of moneyed interests that are trying to get close to him saying, do you? Do you really? That's Friday. Till then, this is your old pal, Justin Robert Young, saying, some shows talk about politics, others talk about politics, and still more discuss politics. But this is the only show that dares discuss. Oh, 3.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.
Dog and Pony Show audio.